Hello, everyone, and welcome to Developing Leaders Gather Here. This is the podcast for aspiring and established leaders who want to take their skills to the next level. Our mission is to provide you with tools, knowledge, and inspiration that you need to grow as a leader and build high-performing teams. Each week, we bring you interviews with thought leaders and experts in the field of leadership development, along with practical advice and strategies that you can apply to your own leadership journey. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting out, our goal is to help you become the best leader that you can be. So join us as we explore the world of leadership development and discover what it takes to develop the skills, mindset, and habits of a successful leader. So if you have been following us along here on our Developing Leaders Gather Here podcast, we are on episode 2, wrapped up episode 1, where we talked about this leadership journey, right? And talked about some of the foundational steps of, again, continuing to develop ourselves as leaders. And the first topic that we talked about was creating awareness, being self-aware as a leader, as far as where we stand, what do we need to do. We talked about different tests that you can kind of identify where in that leadership journey you are yourself by utilizing the SWOT analysis, by doing a Myers-Briggs, a DISC, anything along those lines, or simply by getting some feedback from people. On today's episode, we're going to talk about communication and the strategies and share some strategies for effective communication in the workplace. So without further ado here, again, the context that we're going to share today is going to be coming together from about 5 or 6 different books that I have intentionally for the last year and a half have wanted to work on my communication skills. And in that research process, I was able to get a hold of some books that have helped me on my journey. And as we continue to develop ourselves as leaders, I wanted to share some of these tips and some of these books with you. So before we get started, I'll share the books, and though this will be in the comments as well for you to find out. But we got books from John Maxwell, Everyone Communicates, and If You Connect, What the Most Effective People Do Differently. So again, if you're looking for ways to be a little more effective on your communication journey as a leader, that is a great book to get your hands on. What I love about John Maxwell's books is that each chapter calls you to action, right? So as you're absorbing this information, as you're learning some new techniques and different skills, there's actions that you are to take to apply those so that you can continue to develop yourself. Another one was a book by Brené Brown, called Dare to Lead, Brave Work, Tough Conversations, and Whole Hearts. This was a great book. So again, if you consume these books by reading, or whatever your best method of consuming these books is, by audio, whatever works for you, I highly suggest that you take a look at that book. And obviously the legend, or the go-to book from Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Powerful Lessons in Personal Change, and Patrick Lencioni, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, A Leadership Fable. And recently we were able to finish, or I was able to finish, a book by Kim Scott called Radical Candor. So again, the context of today's episode is to kind of put together some of the best practices and some of the commonalities from these great figures, or these great folks that have traveled a little further than us when it comes to leadership and when it comes to communication. So I wanted to categorize some of their common calls to action on effective communication in the workplace, or effective communication, period. And I came up with about, let me see here, I got about 10 points that each one of these folks kind of guide us into their books as far as how to better improve ourselves when it comes to communicating. All right, so we'll jump into the first portion here, and advice from each author. So again, some of the stuff that comes through very vividly as you read these books, or as you do some research on, okay, as a new leader, or as a developing leader, or as a leader that has been there and done that, what are some best tips that you have put in place to better improve your communication? And the very first topic that all these authors kind of have in common is counter intuitive, if you will, when you think about communication, right? Because I don't know about you, but when I think about communication, I think about talking, right? If I'm able to communicate, if I'm able to yap, if I'm able to talk, to me, in my early leadership journey, that meant that I was communicating. You know, I had something to say, I said it, and that was it. Each one of these authors kind of pulls our attention on all 6 of these books, right? About the first thing that you want to hone in or you want to improve on when it comes to effective communication is to do active listening. So active listening, right? Meaning do not even say a word, just listen. Just be intentional about listening. Give your full attention to the person that's speaking. Be able to seek to understand, right? That's one of the 7 habits of highly effective people from Stephen Covey is seek to understand other people's perspectives. Ask questions to clarify the understandings, and obviously pay attention to nonverbal cues. So as counterintuitive, right? When we think about, you know what, I'm going to take some time today and I'm going to improve on my communication skill and how I can speak better and how I can speak clearly. Yes, those are all critical steps to communication and effective communication. However, each one of these authors is kind of challenging us to, hey, start by listening. And not just listening, but by making sure that you're actively engaged in the conversation with whoever you're speaking to. Give them the full attention. I thought that was very interesting to start off, or looking at the commonalities amongst all these books, was that active listening was number one. Bringing that down to our second takeaway on building on, or second takeaway tip or skill, if you will, to be a better communicator is to be clear and concise with your language. So clear and concise with your language, meaning use simple, direct, and easy to understand words. Oftentimes when we, due to our, we could be subject matter experts at something, and as we're trying to deliver a message to someone else, we might use, language or technical language that might be confusing to others, might be second nature to us because that's what we do day in and day out. And those words and those acronyms and everything that we use is very easy to understand for us, but it could confuse the ones that we're communicating to. So avoiding any technical language that might be confusing to the listener. So keeping the message simple, clear, and direct. And at the same time, making sure that your message is received and understood by everyone. And one way to, and then we'll dive in a little later on one of the last topics here is, but one way to see whether your message was received by the audience is to kind of look at their nonverbal cues, right? Look and see how is it that they're perceiving this message? What's going on? Are they staying in tune? Are they shaking their head? Are their eyes down? Are you connected with them or not? Use language that is appropriate to the audience and the situation. So if you're speaking to a group of people, make sure that you've done some homework to understand where they are in their leadership journey, if you will, or what is the message that they're wanting to hear, and cater your message to that. Number 3, empathy. Seeking to understand others' perspectives and feelings before responding. Obviously, this is something that I continue to struggle with, and I continue to at least create awareness on when I'm communicating with others. Leaving those biases and leaving those prejudgments to the side. If someone is speaking, I make it now more so an intentional part of my understanding is to just kind of stop and understand and put my shoes on their perspective before responding, right? Because oftentimes I've fallen in the trap of, we got a topic that we're going to discuss, a conversation strikes, and I'm just literally waiting for the individual to stop talking so that I can respond. And in that process, I'm not actively listening, right? I'm not paying attention to what is being said, and a disconnect could happen between you and your audience. So again, being empathetic to who you're talking to, listen actively and pay attention to any nonverbal cues, demonstrate compassion and understanding in your communication, put yourself in their shoes, right? And consider their perspective. So again, all of these topics are at some point mentioned in each one of these different 6 books that we're referring to. So these are the commonalities that some of these great communicators are sharing with us. And I just wanted to kind of bring all these 6 books for you and say, hey, here's the best tips or best actions to go through. And again, the challenge for myself as I go through this journey is to apply what it is that I'm learning, right? So reading a book, listening to an audiobook is great. I can go on my little diary or on my little checklist, and I said, yep, I've done 6 books on communication this year. My goal when I started the year was 3, but I'm wrapping up 6 books on how to be a better communicator. But that means nothing, right? So my takeaway for myself as I'm developing myself continuously to be a better leader is to figure out a way how I can apply each one of these commonalities on those books. So putting yourself in other people's shoes, showing compassion. And in the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott, one of main things that she talked about or one of the main messages, I guess, that comes to mind every time I think about that book is when it comes to being empathetic is that understanding your audience, right? And she talks about that radical candor, right? Feedback, communicating, providing some feedback back to people. So again, the method of communicating with folks gets measured not at your mouth, but at the listener's ears. All right, let me repeat that because I think there's gold and this is powerful for me at least, right? The radical candor or communication gets measured not at your mouth, right? So we're not measuring how well I'm talking, what am I saying, but it's measured at the listener's ear, because you can sit there and have a great speech and you can have everything grammatically correct and you can, man, just the voice, the vocal, whatever, you mentioned it, right? Your speech just went great. That means nothing, right? Kim Scott's telling us, hey, that means nothing. And if you break that down, it is true, right? Oftentimes we say, man, I nailed that speech. I did really well. Well, the challenge that she's giving us is to create some awareness and say, hey, as well as you think you did speaking it, how well did you do by paying attention to how that audience received that message, right? So again, communication gets measured not at your mouth, but at the listener's ears. That means that you need to be able to adjust for each individual, as everybody has a different method of learning. Everybody has a different method of being spoken to. So creating that awareness when it comes to being an effective communicator, creating that awareness goes a long way. All right, coming down, respect and consideration for others. This was another trait or another skill that helps you be a better communicator. Use a positive language and framing feedback in a constructive way. Avoid negative language or criticism that can undermine morale or productivity. Ensure that you're creating a positive and productive work environment that helps others grow and improve. So again, that talking about that psychological safe place to where folks can speak, folks can ask questions, folks can challenge one another in a respectful way. That's the message there, right? So if you're not creating that environment to where folks can ask questions, challenge the status quo, be able to provide some innovative ideas, you're going to be doing what you've done. Vulnerability and authenticity. So this is big, right? Being genuine, being connected with people. At the end of the day, I mentioned it, I think, in the previous episode, right? But leadership is not about titles. Now, some folks get clinged on their titles and they use that as a way of power to get results done through others. And my journey or my commitment to myself when it comes to leadership is I'd like to be able to connect with people in a manner to where folks want to be influenced by me, right? Not necessarily because I have a title. I'm a general manager, I'm a director, I'm a lead, and whatever that might be. I'm a manager, I'm a boss. You mentioned it, right? So at the end of the day, we're all human beings. So being vulnerable, being authentic is very important. Sharing thoughts, feelings, and experiences so that you can build a stronger relationship. I've worked for people in the past that there was a physical and there was an invisible door that you could not get through to them, right? So these were bosses leaders that I looked up to that managed larger buildings or whatever you got. At the end of the day, there was literally a barrier, right? A physical barrier, a door that was always closed, right? So to get to talk to that individual, whether you had an idea or whatever it might be, there was a blocked door that you had to go through, right? You had to knock, you had to get permission, you had to get it on the calendar and so forth. And you might say, well, hey, so be it, right? Everybody's got to manage to a schedule, and absolutely right. But then there was an invisible door past that. So once you were into that office, right, there was this idea that, you couldn't share your thoughts, you couldn't share your feelings, you couldn't ask for questions, you couldn't, there was no relationship in there, right? So everything was pretty much done at a title level. Courage and resilience. So when it comes to communication, again, right, being able to overcome your fears and discomfort in communication by developing resilience, embracing vulnerability, using courage to speak up and share your ideas. So using courage to speak up and share your ideas is very important, but you want to make sure that you're creating an environment, right, that you've established a solid foundation to where that culture can support that. We talked about clarity, right, being able to use clear and concise language, and then trust. Trust is very important. If we want to gain trust, it starts by finding that common ground. It starts by being vulnerable. It starts by being authentic. It starts by spending time and energy to be able to build a relationship with someone. That's how folks will trust you. You cannot demand trust. You cannot ask for trust to happen on a dime just because you said to. I don't care what your title is, right? Trust comes through time, through relationship, and through a lot of investment and a lot of time spent together with a group, with an individual, and by putting their needs first and making sure that you're there for them. The last piece that I wanted to talk about that came out was nonverbal communication. So this nonverbal communication is very, very important. It's a great cue as a communicator to be aware of, because if not, you can again kind of pat yourself on the back and say, man, I had a great speech. I was able to cover everything that I needed. And then you might find yourself saying, well, why don't they get it? What in the heck is going on? Why do I have to repeat myself so often? Right? So when you're communicating with someone, be in the lookout for nonverbal cues and see how your message is being connected. And when you see those eyes roll, right? If it's that as vivid, or as if someone is as honest and as direct with you on that, that is an opportunity to kind of stop and say, all right, I need to either re-explain myself. I need to find another way to convey my message. I need to spend some time with that individual and that group of people, because obviously what I thought was a great message did not connect on their side, right? So again, going back to what Kim Scott challenged us to, right? Communications does not happen or does not get measured. Effective communication, if we were to say, does not get measured at the mouth of the speaker, but at the ears of the listeners, right? So that's a way to look for that. Pay attention to your own body language at times, right? And facial expressions. If you're striking the conversation and somebody brings up an idea, because there you are encouraging folks to come up with ideas, just be very mindful of the body language that you are portraying yourself, right? If you're closing your arms, that's kind of like the universal language of, okay, I'm closed, I don't want to listen to you. If I'm not maintaining eye contact, if I'm fidgeting with something along the lines, that means that, I lost attention, I lost what we were talking about here. And it's okay when those happen to just kind of guide yourself right back into wherever you were in the communication and say, hey, lost it. I have not been able to follow up with you during that time. So again, nonverbal communication is a critical component of ensuring that you're connecting with your audience. So talked a lot about the communication piece, but I want to leave everybody today, again, on this episode, or if you're on our LinkedIn live audio event here today, communication is a critical tool that as we work on developing ourselves as leaders, we need to find out where we are, what we need to do, and how we need to improve on that process. But the key takeaway, again, taken from Kim Scott's Radical Candor book, is that communication, or effective communication, happens not at the mouth of the speaker, but at the ears of the listener. So very, very important for you as a takeaway to take some time and see and create awareness of where are you on your communication skill sets when it comes to developing yourself as a leader. Is there anything that you need to work on? Is your audience telling you anything that you need to improve on? All right. That is it today for today's episode. So if you're listening to us on the LinkedIn audio event, thank you. If you're checking us out on our podcast, Developing Leaders Together Here, you can listen to that on any of your favorite apps or favorite podcast spots. If you're on our YouTube channel, thank you. We'd like to get some feedback from you, but that is it for today's episode. We hope that you found some of this inspiring and informative, and that you are one step closer to becoming the leader that you aspire to be. If you have any questions or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us on our website or social media channels. And don't forget to ensure that you're tuning in for our next week's episode as we come up. Next portion, as we continue on this journey of developing ourselves as leaders, we're going to be talking a little bit about building trust with your team. So far, we've covered self-awareness and leadership. It all starts with leading yourself and understanding what is it that you need to work on. Talked about today's episode on strategies for effective communication in the workplace. And we're going to continue this through on our next episode with building trust with your team. Again, share this podcast, share this YouTube channel with anyone that you think might add value. If you have any ideas for any guests that could teach us something by bringing them on and continue to, again, provide this platform for all of us to come together. And if you know someone that is further ahead on the journey of leadership development that we all can gain from, please share this episode with them or share this link with them so that they can come in and we can collaborate and learn from one another. Take care, have a good one, and enjoy your weekend. Thank you.